Hi, this is a quick part 2 to my long video where I discussed the core combo cards of my standard deck. There has been a change to it that's kind of major, but I'll be discussing that in a long I'm gonna do later on in the future once I introduce all the cards in the main deck in shorts. So that being said, in my haste to introduce the combo, I had a glaring omission that was quite teachable to those that are new to Magic, and I do sincerely apologize. I hope that the community doesn't blow me out with removal for not reading everything correctly in my haste to make that video. Let us look now at the interaction between Momo, Friendly Flier, and Exalted Sunborn. Okay, so if we look at Momo, we can basically understand Momo to be a cost reducer. Now, he's reducing the cost of the first non-lemur flyer that we cast per turn. Now, if we look at Exalted Sunborn, Sunborn is an angel wizard. So if we look, Momo's ability to reduce the cost of the Sunborn does indeed apply. So instead of 3 generic and 2 white for Exalted Sunborn to be put into play with a Momo on the field, it actually costs 2 generic and 2 white for a total of 4 mana instead of 5. So why is this important? Well, if we look at the warp cost of the Exalted Sunborn, it is 1 generic and 1 white. Now, with a Momo in play, if we looked at the rules, and I already did and checked it out, and it does work, Momo reduces the same cost, the 1 generic, whether it's 5 mana for the Exalted Sunborn or now for the warp cost of the generic and white. With a Momo in play, we eliminate the generic mana, and so to cast Sunborn with a Momo in play, it only cost us the white mana. I feel I had to highlight this interaction because this is the reason why we can pop off on turn 2 if we played a Momo on turn 1. Without the Momo in play, we'd have to spend 2 mana to warp in Sunborn and then do nothing. So it doesn't really do anything for us. Unless we had a Momo on turn 1, then it allows us to warp in the Sunborn for the 1 white mana, which allows us to Moxfer and go off. If you'd like to know what that means, you got to check the long. I'm sorry about that. But I'm glad I was able to share this interaction between Momo and Sunborn because it's crucial. I believe it's so crucial. I had to come back and add this because when you Moxfer there, it's the Born Moxfer because the Sunborn's in play. Otherwise, it's just Moxfer. So let's move on. Okay, so I mentioned in the long as well, and I did not spot the cards, so I do it now. And Molten Duplication and Devastating Onslaught are almost identical. One is an X spell, and however much mana you put into it is how many copies of the spell you get. Whereas Molten Duplication is just the 2, and it happens once. So if you spent more mana than necessary than 3, let's say you spent the 5 and you put X equals 2, then you would have 2 copies of Molten Duplication in a way on 1 card, which is why Devastating Onslaught is very interesting because we basically can, for 3 mana, have the same effect that we have for 2. So it just costs us 1 more. But the upside of it being a potentially 5 or 7 mana spell copying the same creature, and in our case, the main one would be Sunborn. Then, yeah, there is an argument to be made that it should be in the main of a deck, and it would be, and unfortunately, it isn't. unless I want to go heavy, but there is a card that has replaced this one, unfortunately, and I will be making a short about that soon. But I did want to mention how this devastating Onslaught card is like having redundancy in the deck as extra copies of Molten Duplication. Now, that being said, I kind of spoiled it, but I will later on. Thank you very much for your time and understanding that I did that very quickly, that long, and I did miss highlighting these cards, and I just wanted to do this one real quick before I continued. Thank you very much. Enjoy.